So let me see where I stopped last. Okay, stopped at Taylor's rule. So, do you want me to go over any part of the earlier discussion? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So
Yeah.
could you go over the activist policy once?
This one.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, actually, I didn't discuss it. Give me a moment, please. Okay. See, the question that is being asked over here is that, I mean, the earlier discussion, lags, etc., shows that it's very difficult to fine tune the economy. So, in that case, we have two options. We can either decide to stick to a long run rule, which is one, the so called rules. We can just allow the economy to function on its own and not interfere. At the most, we go for a long run rule. The second step is that we can respond only to major shocks. So if there's a mild increase in unemployment, we just allow it because it is going to be taken care of in the long run. However, if there's a very sharp increase in unemployment, for instance during COVID, in that case we should try to introduce appropriate counter-cyclical policies. So if there's a sudden shock, maybe inflation goes up, maybe unemployment goes up, maybe the growth rate plunges down, and we expect that this is going to continue for quite some time. Only in such cases should we adopt an appropriate counter-cyclical policies. Now, how effective is such fine-tuning? Okay. So, Dornbusch looks at the experience of US in the 1980s. See, the In US, the central bank, their central bank is called the Federal Reserve Bank. So they have a central, at a national level, they have a Federal Reserve Bank, and they also have reserve banks at the state levels. And these are very powerful, more important than the Reserve Bank in India. So the arguments against activism had been started in the 1970s, 80s. So around this time, let us see how the Fed was acting. See, throughout 1970s, inflation had been rising. We can see this inflation rate. This is the deep blue line. You can see it is rising. The light blue line is the unemployment rate, and the black line is the interest rate, which is the instrument with the Federal Reserve Bank. Okay. So you can see that starting from the 1970s, inflation is rising, unemployment is falling. So then in this period, in the early 1980s, in fact, from 1979 to 1987, Paul Volcker was made chairman of the Federal Bank. So his primary target was to bring inflation under control. Inflation had crossed about 14, it's not very clear, but more than 14%, 15, 16%. So inflation had to be controlled. As a result of this, what he did was he also increased the rate of the interest rate. So when he took over in and you can see that during his period, 1979 to the mid 80s, more or less the interest rate was very high. As a result of this light blue line, which is unemployment, that was pretty low, although, and it was just above the natural rate, and it started to climb up. So inflation was controlled. You can see that inflation is falling in this region, but unemployment is rising. And unemployment, you can see, reached a peak around the 1983-84. The second phase is when Alan Greenspan became the Fed chair. He became the Fed chair after Paul Volcker in 1988, in 87, and as soon as he took over power, immediately there was a stock market crash in the US. So that means he faced a massive potential crisis. Again, look at what was happening. When the stock market crash occurred, unemployment rates, which had fallen, again had fallen. Okay. Inflation, which had been controlled by Paul Volcker, was again increasing. Now, Alan Greenspan realized that when you have a stock market crash, liquidity becomes a problem. And so what he did was, people will not want to invest. So what he did was reduce the interest rates, make borrowing cheaper so that people start investing, and this will pull up the economy. So you can see that over time, the interest rate declined. As a result of this, inflation rate, which peaked over here, started to decline. Unemployment rose, but with a lag, unemployment started to decrease. So as I've said, you can't immediately introduce a policy and expect it to take action. So ultimately, unemployment did fall, but it took some time to fall. Over here, again, you can see that Bernard became the Fed chair, And again, inflation was, sorry, this is unemployment. Unemployment increased. And inflation was also starting to rise. It had fallen to low levels and it was starting to rise. So if unemployment is peaking, it means you will have to stimulate demand, increase production, and ensure that your capacity is utilized. In fact, it is even better if you can increase the capacity. So to increase the capacity or utilize existing capacity, you require more funds so that borrowing should be made cheaper. So you can see that over here, Bernanke reduced the interest rate initially. And when interest rate, etc., they started operating, then he gradually started increasing the interest rate. But again, he saw that there were problems because by then the 2008 crash had come. So again, he had to reduce interest rate. There were two crashes, one after another. One shock over here, another shock. This was the subprime crisis. Okay.
So in
Actually, Bernanke, yeah.
So Bernanke initially reduced the interest
No,
rate.
sorry. No, not Bernanke. Bernanke became chairman in 2006. So around this time, whoever was the Fed chairman, he's reduced the interest rate. Bernanke became chairman over here. The crash occurred, subprime crisis occurred. And then, this diagram is not perfectly drawn. Wait a minute, let me just, yeah. So Bernanke became chairman over here, and he again started reducing the interest rate. Okay, so this is the subprime crisis, and this is the an earlier crisis, a smaller shock which occurred. So in both cases, the response of the Fed chair was the same, to reduce interest rate. Actually, if you want to think about it, this is one shock and this is another shock. I've just clubbed it together. Yeah, I think this will be better. So this is one shock, interest rate was lowered, Bernanke became chairperson, and then you have the next shock, the subprime crisis, which is still has the effect as an effect on the global economy. So the problem is that it's fine. I mean, this type of policy is fine, and I mean you should note that they are. I mean, obviously it's a monetary authority, so they are going to use monetary instruments. But you should note that it is just because it's the money supply, it's a monetary intervention. That is why it is effective. If they had gone for fiscal intervention, the US government had gone for fiscal intervention, it would have taken a much longer period. So if you have a crisis, it is better to go for a monetary policy one. If you want to go for one policy, even better is to go for a bouquet of policies. Third is, don't overshoot, be modest. If you believe that you should increase money supply by 3%, don't do it. Increase it by 2%. Do it slowly, cold turkey, so that gradualism, so that people can incorporate these policy changes into their expectations. Okay, so now one thing is that when the policies are being introduced over here, see, they have lags which continue even beyond this period. So the objective may be this part, but the action is may crossover, may have some impact in the future. So this is also something that you should keep in mind. So even if you are going for trying to tackle a major shock, well, I mean, you'll have to be careful. An activist's policy is necessary, But even then, you have to take into account various limitations. Okay. So is it clear? Do you want me to discuss something else? Read it up in
Yes,
Dornbusch.
yes, sir, it's clear.
Okay. Okay. I stopped at this point, right? Okay. I'll just get some water, please. Okay. So we had discussed a Taylor's rule. Now, if you want to have design rules, so what basically we are saying is that if you want to introduce counter-cyclical policies, one way is you can use discretion. So depending on the situation, you use a discretionary policy, and in one case you may increase money supply, in one case you may increase interest rate, and so on. As you have seen that this is not a very practically feasible policy. The other option is that, yeah, you do go for some counter-cyclical responses, but depending upon which phase of the cycle you are in, but don't leave any scope for discretion. Give a rule. Okay. Set down a rule. So that means if you have slump, you're going to go and do this. If you have a boom, you're going to do this. So that means you're going to have a constant growth rate rule. Okay. Now, the problem is that if you go for some type of even what you can do is you can simply just have a constant growth rule focusing on the long run. So let me break it up, otherwise it's going to create a bit of a confusion. So you have three options: discretionary response to counteract cycles. Okay, this is the discretionary alternative. Clear? So it's some type of, you can say, autopilot system. How did I- So the Taylor's rule is, you can say, is one such option. If inflation is very high, above the expected target rate, you do one thing. If it is below, you do something else. The constant rule alternative focus on long run growth and ignore short run cyclical fluctuations. Friedman, for instance, as we'll come to it later on. Friedman said that monetary policy should grow at a constant rate, and this rate should be 2 to about 4, maximum 4 to 5%. And we should not respond to disturbances except in the case of extreme shocks. And Friedman writes, as you can see, that if you steer in a particular direction, take the economy along a particular direction, the economy will be stable. And one way of doing so is to ensure a steady, moderate growth in money supply. There will be short-term fluctuations, but if you ignore them, they will just die down by itself. If you try to interfere, these cyclical fluctuations are going to become more violent. The economy will be destabilized. Okay, is it clear? Now, the problem with this constant growth rule is that since the economy is changing, okay, there should be some flexibility in such rules. I mean, okay, we are talking about a long-run growth, but at a particular point of time, given the global situation, given the structure of the Indian economy, maybe a 3% growth rate in money supply is appropriate. Okay? But over time, when the global scenario changes, when the structure of the economy has changed, then the 3% rule may not be adequate. It should be increased to, let us say, 5%. Okay, so we just can't say that this 3% should be continued with till perpetuity. So the question is, who will change the rules? Okay, should the policy rule be announced? And another point that should be noted is that rules are set in terms of money supply growth, which is basically an intermediate target. Okay. But it is not an ultimate target. Remember the distinction between intermediate and ultimate targets? Agents are actually interested in income, demand, production. So if my plans are set not in terms of money supply, which is an instrument for the government or intermediate target for the government, but my plans are based on what will be the future income, what will be the future demand for goods, and so on. The government doesn't announce that. They simply announce that money supply is going up by 4%. How it translates to income, demand for goods, that is more difficult to determine. Okay, so Friedman's rules.
Sir, could you show the policy option slide?
This one.
Sir, could you show the Friedman slide?
And it's just Kritika, just One sec, I'll just, I want to
Sir
emphasize on one
Upanita.
thing. Oh, yeah, Upanita, sorry. Yeah. Uh, Sorry. What I want to say is that over here, you have perfect discretion. You don't, so people don't know how you are going to act. Here, in both cases, you have rules. In this case, the rule is never going to change. Whatever happens, you're not going to change the rule. Money supply is going to go up by 4%. Here, what happens is you set out a rule, but the rules depend upon the circumstances. So if it is boom, you know what is going to happen. If it is slump, you know what is going to happen. Okay, there's a rule. The change in variables is going to will depend on the economic circumstances. But because there's a rule, you know how it is going to change. Sorry. So you can see that you have got two growth rates. You have got two growth rates, and if it is boom, you're going to the growth rate will be GB. If it is slump, it is going to be GS. So as an agent, I just need to know whether it is a boom period or slump period. That is all what I need to know. I'll immediately know what is the government policy. Right? And this is a fairly weak assumption. Agents will know whether it is boom or slump. Here what they are saying is it is just G bar. That is, whatever the situation, it is always going to be G bar. Whether it's 3%, 4%, whatever, it's always 3%. Boom, slump, whatever. And here, if we don't know, agents don't know, how the government will react. Yeah, so we wanted to see Friedman. Have you finished?
Yes, last line, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. That's it.
Okay. Another problem. So, well, these are the problems with going for a Friedman type constant rule. But another problem is what we call dynamic or time inconsistency. I'll just get back to you. If you want, you can copy this slide. আমি মিউট করে দিই। Sorry, very sorry for. Okay. See, the main problem, if you want to, another problem with this constant rule is that you have a problem of dynamic or time inconsistency. Now, what exactly is this problem? This problem is that, see, sometimes you commit to a rule, okay, whatever the rule is. You announce that this is a rule and you're going to stick to it. Then, certain very special circumstances come up, relevant only in the very short run, and you say that, okay, this is a very special case, it's never going to happen, so let me depart from the rule. What happens in that case is you lose your credibility. See, what is the purpose of making rules? You want to show that you're going to behave in a consistent manner. But if you depart from the rules in special cases, well, your commitment to the rule becomes less credible. People will become uncertain about how you're going to react. They will always say that, look, the policymaker has departed once. They may say again that this is a special case, so I'm going to depart again. Okay. So is this clear what the problem of dynamic inconsistency? I'll give you an example. In fact, this is a better example. See, the hostage issue. The government announces that we are not going to encourage terrorism, and so if any terrorist group takes a hostage, we are not going to bargain with them. Now, suppose an actual hostage crisis occurs. In that case, there's a tremendous pressure on the government that, okay, this is a very special case, these people are going to die, so bargain with them, just this case. As soon as you do so once, immediately the other groups will feel that, okay, the government has departed from the rule once, so if we take another hostage, the government will again bargain with us. But if you commit to the rule, okay, fine, you have taken hostages, kill them, we are not going to do anything. The other hostages, other terrorist groups will realize that, okay, if we take hostages, nothing is going to happen. So if you commit to a rule and stick to it, the element of discretion is ruled out. Okay. The problem is that you always have the short-run incentive to treat it as a special case and depart. So is it clear what we mean by time inconsistency? I'll now explain it using an economic example. But is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let us take an economic example. In some situation, policymakers announce in advance that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. What is the objective of making a prior announcement? So people, agents know that this is how, let us say, money supply is going to change, or this is how the fiscal policy is going to be changed. So they are going to incorporate this into their expectations. When they form expectations, they are going to incorporate this as an information that in 2022, the government is going to do this. In 23, the government is going to do this. So once the expectations are formed, they will make the plans in a certain way. Subsequently, when the time actually comes, 22, the policymakers may have faced a temptation that they go back on the announcement. Well, if they do it once, it might be okay. But over time, what will happen is, even policymakers will lose their credibility. Even if they make an announcement, people will start saying that, look, the government also always makes the announcements and then it does something else. So there's no point in believing them, believing what the government does. So when they form expectations, well, this information, the announcement of the government, is treated as false information and they don't use it. But if you can commit yourself to a policy rule that, okay, this is a rule and I will not depart from this under any circumstances, even if the world breaks, even if the government falls, we are not going to move away. Then people will start believing you and you really act in that way. Okay.
Sir, could you show the hostage slide once?
But please don't ask me to remove the mask of the second person.
Done, sir. So is that some very famous personality? The second person?
No, actually, it happened in around the 1970s, when Jimmy Carter was the U.S. president. There was a revolution in Iran. The Ayatollah Khomeini seized power, and the Shah of Iran was deposed, and he had to run away. What the Iran government did was they went to the US embassy and they took all the staff prisoners. Okay, they kept all of them together in the embassy, but as hostages. And they tried to bargain with the US government. So then there was a very famous episode in which the US government decided to launch a counterattack. They sent in the troops to rescue the hostages. But unfortunately, the attempt failed. Because see, it's the government also which is supporting the people who are keeping them hostages. I think it was the students who were keeping them hostages. And ultimately, it dragged on for quite a long period, almost a year, if not more. And then the government finally had to agree to the demands of the Iran government. So it was a very famous crisis. And this was one of the reasons why Jimmy Carter lost the elections and Ronald Reagan came to power. You can just read up the thing in the Wikipedia. Search for Iran hostage crisis. You'll get the entire history.
So there's a movie also on it.
Maybe. I mean, this was even too young for me also. I also don't remember all the details. A very famous example of not time inconsistency but time consistency was by Alexander Hamilton. See, the US War of Independence, you know what the Boston Tea Party is? Do you know what the Boston Tea Party is?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
The Americans argued that they would not pay any tax without representation in the tax council, and
Yeah,
they didn't agree to pay the 3-penny tax and fill all the tea boxes in the sea at Boston port.
Yeah, so they dressed up like Red Indians and they boarded the ships and took all the tea and dumped it into the sea. Very good. This was Prithviraj, right? Am
Yes,
I
sir.
right? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so after the Boston Tea Party, the US War of Independence started. And during the war, US was helped by France and some other countries in Europe. And the government, the revolutionary government incurred huge amounts of debts during the war. At that time, obviously, it was not possible for them to repay the debts But they said that, okay, after the war is over, we will repay what we have borrowed. So the war ended. Washington was elected as president, and it was now time to repay the money. Now, how will the government repay the money? You have to impose taxes. But imposing taxes is very costly and therefore it's very unpopular. So many Americans advocated, say that don't pay back the money. This is something that has been done in recent times also. Mexico had borrowed from, fallen into debt, and Mexico had said that we are going to default. We will not repay. Alexander Hamilton, who was Secretary of the State Treasury, basically what is known as the finance minister over here, opposed this policy. He said that US may have to borrow again in the future. So if we don't repay the money now, in the future when we again ask for money, will someone lend us? Governments will say that, look, you have borrowed once and then you have said, I'm not going to repay. So now again you are asking for funds. What is the guarantee that you are going to repay this money also? You will take the money and then you will say, sorry, I can't impose taxes, so I can't pay you back. So in order to maintain my standing, that is the standing of US, Hamilton said that we should commit to honoring our debts. We should repay our debts. We may take some time, extra time. Instead of 2 years, we'll say that, okay, we can't pay it easily. We'll pay it over 4 years. But we have to say that we are going to repay the debts. So this was a policy of time consistency. Okay. So I'm ending at this point. The next chapter is the choice between, another very important example of this is the choice between inflation and unemployment. See, what happens is that if you want to control for inflation, you say that, okay, we will control inflation up to this point. We won't let inflation go up above this level. Unemployment starts rising. Sorry, another phone. Hello? বলুন। হ্যাঁ, চলে আসুন, আমরা সবসময় কেউ না কেউ আছি। এটা হচ্ছে আপনি পার্ক সার্কাস থেকে আসবেন না সায়েন্স সিটি থেকে আসবেন? পার্ক সার্কাস থেকে। পার্ক সার্কাস থেকে আপনি সায়েন্স সিটির দিকে যাবেন, মা সেতুর তলা দিয়ে। আচ্ছা, তপসিয়া মোড়, তপসিয়া ট্যাংরার যে ক্রসিংটা, ডান দিকে ঘুরবেন, 24 নম্বর বাস স্ট্যান্ড আছে। ঘুরেই কোনায় হচ্ছে রিলায়েন্সের শোরুমটা, তারপরের বিল্ডিং হচ্ছে সানফ্লাওয়ার টাওয়ার 1 ফ্ল্যাট 3B, B for Bond. Okay. Sorry. So what happens is that you commit yourself to keep ensuring that inflation is within certain limits, and then unemployment starts rising. Now, unemployment is very unpopular. People are losing their jobs. And so you say that, okay, unemployment is rising. So what we can do is, we will introduce policies to stimulate demand. The problem with such a policy is that inflation may go up. It's likely to go up. So what is happening is that you had committed yourself to a inflationary target, but when unemployment rises, you break your commitment. You're prepared to accept a higher level of inflation in order to control unemployment. So the choice between inflation and unemployment is another example, is a very good example of time inconsistency. In fact, there was a very famous paper by Richard Nordhaus, which is called on what he called political business cycles. See, when a government comes to power, it announces targets for inflation, unemployment, and then introduces policies to address both these problems. Now, initially, after elections, initially the government focuses on inflation, to control inflation and keep it within certain limits. But when the next election, the time comes for the next elections, people are going to pay more importance to unemployment. So, when the term is coming to an end, they switch the priority and start focusing on unemployment. So depending on how long you have, how long you're ruling, when is the time for the next election, your primary target switches from inflation to unemployment. And you start introducing such a policy. So just as you have business cycles, you have what Nordhaus calls political cycles. In one cycle, you focus on inflation. When you're coming to re-election, you focus on unemployment. But the relation between inflation and unemployment, therefore, is very important, and that is going to be the discussion of the next chapter. As I've said previously, GC was supposed to cover it, but she has some time problems, and so she has asked me to cover it. So your course is not increasing, only who is going to cover the course, that is going to change. So these are your references.
Sir, I have a question regarding these policies.
Yeah.
So it's a bit off topic, but can $6 billion really solve world hunger? Is it an accurate description of the problem? There was a tweet by the WFP chief, and then Elon Musk reported that it won't.
See, what we can do is see, there are two things. One is that we should have you seen this film? What is the name of the film? It was by Denzel Washington on this rugby. The Titans. Let me see what the name was. Denzel Washington. Remember the Titans. Have you seen this film?
No, sir.
Well, I'm also digressing. Since we have 20 minutes left, let me digress a little bit. Well, in that scene, what happens? This is about a college team which plays American soccer. And Denzel Washington is the coach. So one of the star players gets injured during the match, and he calls up another player and says that you have to substitute him. So he says that, look, I'm not ready, coach. So Denzel Washington, you've heard of him, I'm sure. Denzel Washington says that, look, when I was 14 years, both my parents died. I had 12 brothers and sisters, and I had to take care of them. I was also not ready, but I had to go out and present and see that I could take care of the schooling and so on. And this inspires the person and he goes out to the field. And the assistant coach turns around and asks him, 12 brothers and sisters? He says, yes, 12 is a very nice number. So, do you understand what I'm saying? It may not have been 12. It may have been 3 brothers. But 12 sounds very nice and inspiring. So one purpose of saying 6 billion is to give a target which is easy to understand, gettable. It may not actually be 6 billion. The person who made the tweet, he also knows it's not 6 billion. But it looks nice. Second is you can make calculations. Okay. Well, think of it in this way, that suppose, I mean, I have a very simple household calculation. Your father was working from home, and now he's going to office every day, 5 days a week. So you have to buy sanitizers for him. So you can make an estimate that, okay, if you buy a bottle of sanitizer, that is going to last this long. And so you can make an estimate of how much money you need to spend on sanitizers for your father, right? That is possible. Simple mathematics. Let us say he requires 1 bottle every week. So 4 weeks, you need 4 bottles. And you know the price of each bottle. Let us say 100 rupees. So your monthly budget will be 400, right? In case of these hunger, etc., the complications are much more complicated. But the basic principle is like this. You're dealing with more people, you're dealing with a lot of more complexities. That is why the calculations are much more difficult. But the basic principles are like this. It's 6 billions, it can be a little bit more, it can be a little bit less. And the most important thing is that you're ignoring the bridge phenomenon. You know what the bridge phenomenon is?
No, sir.
Well, a minister from Bangladesh came over and he was interacting with his fellow minister in India, in Bihar, in India. And well, the Indian minister took him to his home, and the the Bangladeshi minister was very impressed. He says, it's a very nice home that you have. How could you build such a nice home? So he took him up to the stairs, to the roof, and said that, can you see the river over there? Yeah, I can see it. And look, if you look carefully, you'll be able to see a bridge over there. There's a bridge. Yes. Yeah. See? 30%. That is the secret of my house. So the Bangladeshi minister nodded. Say, okay. So the next year, the Indian minister went over, visited Bangladesh, and now he was invited by the Bangladeshi minister. And his house was even more stupendous. Wonderful house. So he said that, your house is even better than mine. How could you do it? He said, come up. So they took him to the rooftop. He said, look over there in the distance. Padma Nadi is going by. Can you see it? He said, yes, I can see it. And can you see the bridge over the river? So the Indian minister looked long and very hard, and he said, no, I can't see any bridge. They said, see, 100%. So the 6 billion doesn't take into account a lot of other things. It assumes that the money is spent efficiently, honestly. We should remember that it's just an estimate. You should not give too much attention to it. Make it a rule, make it very important, nor should you ignore it. It gives an idea of what you require to fulfill your targets. Okay? You're ignoring the calculations may be wrong. You're assuming that it's being into the program is efficient, the program is implemented honestly, and so on. And above all, you should remember that if you give a very complex figure, you require 4 billion. If you want to do it like this, 6 billion, it has to be implemented in this way. It won't look nice. You'll get very irritated. 6 billion is better. It's more impressive. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So any other questions? Otherwise, we'll come back on tomorrow and start with inflation. By the way, have I sent you the material on inflation?
So in the classroom,
Yes.
you have shared a book.
Okay. Just the relevant chapters. Yeah. In fact, you won't require the entire chapter also. Okay. Okay, shall I close the classroom then?
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.